The Latin word vulnerare, to wound.
Good evening, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion, Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting alchemical light. I'm trying to start my stopwatch for my shirt. There it goes. Okay. Today, or this evening, we're going to be working on the scales from the Viper in the upper left-hand corner there. So I'm going to zoom it into about there, leave it panned out a slight bit for this session, because I'm not sure how far I'm going to go down with it. I may end up using some wave patterning to kind of liquefy this area behind and around the mermaid, and also bringing the scale patterning down through the snake and also through this figure here that will meld into the water patterning that will be kind of washing around in there. But that's just conceptualizing at the moment. For now, we're going to start with the scales on the snake. Oh yeah, and I've got a variety of colors mixed up, several light funky greens, an olive green, a pale green, tree green, a light purple, violet, ultramarine blue, and the hell else? Something else. But anyway, a variety of colors for the scales.
Separation from the world. That's the source of our energy. And the problem is, this doesn't only happen on an individual level, it happens in a social level. Because we live in a society that actually is profoundly alienated. And we live in a society that actually validates our invalidity. We live in a society that validates our false self. So that not only do we develop these compensatory mechanisms, it's even that we're rewarded for it. So let's say you're a deeply wounded person and you emotionally shut down so badly that your eyes go dead because you were hurt so badly you couldn't bear to look at reality. And let's say that you're so scared of vulnerability that you're going to attack vulnerability wherever you see it. And let's say that you feel so weak because you lost that connection to your true self, that you have to have power and control. You know what becomes of you? You become Prime Minister of Canada. That's a deeply traumatized person that we just displaced. He is. He is. And now we've elected another one. Maybe not quite so traumatized. Maybe not quite so wounded. Maybe a little bit more connected. Maybe a little bit. That's the best we can hope for. What I'm saying is that the world rewards, or in my case, the world rewards my workaholism, because this wonderful doctor, always available for everybody except himself, and everybody except the people that really need him close to him. So the world rewards it, and so as the author of the book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying says, the greatest achievement of modern culture is the brilliant selling of samsara. Samsara is the cycle of suffering, and its barren distractions. Modern society seems to me a celebration of all the things that lead away from truth, make truth hard to live for, and discourage people even from believing that it exists. So not only do we suffer this trauma because our parents were unconscious or so hurt themselves that they simply couldn't help traumatizing us, we then have a world that validates the falseness, that validates the personality which was developed as the compensation for the loss. And that's why it's so difficult. And that's why even when people go into ceremony with a plant or with LSD, which is not a plant but a substance, or holotropic breathwork, or meditation, and whatever experiences they have, and there are experiences of tremendous insight that people can journey through these various modalities. The real difficulty is not in having those experiences. The real difficulty is then how do you make that experience live in your life? How do you manifest that insight in your daily living, when the world is so intent on robbing you of the very truth of things, because the economy, the capitalist economy, depends on your false sense of self. If you were truly too connected to yourself, you wouldn't buy most of the products that you buy. At least you wouldn't be so attached to them. You know, I was in San Francisco 3 or 4 years ago, and my wife and I were walking somewhere in the downtown area, and we found this line of people, 4 or 5 abreast, right around the block. So I said to somebody, okay, what's this all about? Why are people lining up for? He says, the iPad, the new iPad just came out. And I said, okay, I get it. I don't have an iPad. I don't appreciate its multiple benefits, but nevertheless, I said, okay, I can believe that the iPad is a wonderful instrument, but why are you lining up? I couldn't get it tomorrow. You know. Man, you don't understand. It's the iPad. I mean, this guy actually thought, and I've had the same thoughts reissued to other products, that this is going to somehow make a difference in his life. So, I mean, this society just feeds off that. So then, let me tell you a few things that I've learned in this psychedelic experience. And I began to work with ayahuasca about 8 years ago now, I guess, when my book on addiction came out. And I kept getting these emails or of questions at my speaking engagements. What do I know about ayahuasca and the healing of addiction? And I'd say, well, I don't know anything about it really. And next question. And a week later, another email or another inquiry. What do you know about ayahuasca and the healing of addiction? I said, nothing. Next question. And I finally started getting annoyed. And I've said this before, but I started feeling like Brian in The Life of Brian. Have you seen that movie? Where people think that Brian is the Messiah, and they keep genuflecting, and they keep, wanting to worship him. And he's saying, listen, I'm not the Messiah, leave me alone. But finally he gets sick of it, and he says, okay, I'm the Messiah, now fuck off, okay? And these people come to him and say, how shall we fuck off, my Lord? You know? And that's how I was with ayahuasca. Okay, I don't want anything about ayahuasca, now fuck off. And then I got the message that maybe the universe is trying to tell me something. I do have a thick brain, a very thick mind. And I was working with psilocybin this summer with a therapist in San Francisco, and I did say to her, listen, you better give me a whole whack of it, because I have a very thick mind, But I got it, there was a message here, and so then I began to work with it, and I really see how it can help. How can it help? And not just ayahuasca, but any path, any substance, and sometimes other paths that don't involve substances. I mean, one of the things I don't want to create here is the impression that I'm not one of these messianic believers in substances or plants. I really am not. Some of you maybe, I'm not. I don't think they're the answers to the problems of the world. I think it's too bad if they were, because they're never going to be around enough for them, and not enough people will participate in them, that they're going to be the answer. The answer is going to have to come from somewhere else. And where the answer is going to have to come from? Deep inside people, because the truth is already there. So the plants don't give us the truth, the plant helps us manifest and see the truth. That's a great path, but I'm not messianic about it. But nevertheless, since we're talking about plants and the plant spirit, how can they help us? So in 2 ways really. Well, at least 2 ways. The first one, when I first did ayahuasca, because somebody said, you know what, you can actually do a ceremony up here in Vancouver, and a Peruvian shaman that I know, Andrew works with, Diego Palma, was up here, and he was leading ceremonies, and about an hour into it, this beautiful music was playing, and there were tears of joy and pleasure coursing down my face, and I felt this tremendous love, and it wasn't love. There was love for particular people, but it was much greater than that. And what I really got was that this love is actually my essence. Which is not to say, and the essence that I've been disconnected from all my life, these skins that I've developed over my heart to protect myself from the pain, because when your heart is open and the love is flowing, you really can get hurt. And last year in December in Yalapa, where I lead the retreats with ayahuasca, I had the experience of my heart opening up and trust connecting me with the universe, and I got that. Really, that's our essence. That opening, that open-heartedness, that love is our essence. And if that's our essence, why don't we realize it? Why doesn't Stephen Harper realize it? Why don't the rest of us realize it? It's because it hurts so much when it's not reciprocated. It hurts so much when it's not understood. It hurts so much when it's wounded. And so we develop these skins, we shut down. And specifically about addictions like many other behaviors are all about escaping from the pain. But if we realize that that love is really our very essence, there's nothing to run away from. What's there to run, if you really get it? And the other thing that the spirit, or plant spirits can do, is they can connect us to the experiences in a very deep way that made us run in the first place. And so, sometimes people talk about bad experiences with ayahuasca or acid or anything. From my point of view, when somebody talks about a bad experience, two things are going on. One is their personality, their mind is judging the experience. Because the personality was developed in the first place to run away from the pain. And all these things that we think we are, they're just our personality, which was developed in the first place as a compensation not to feel pain. But secondly, it also means that when they had that experience, they didn't have the right guidance. Because in the appropriate context, and this is where I think I will probably not be the only one at this conference to emphasize this, but whatever you do, and I know some of you have journeyed by yourselves, I don't recommend it. If you choose that, you choose that. But really, I think we're such complicated, complex beings in the Western world, and there's so much cultural and psychological barrier between who we think we are and who we actually are, that it's really safer to engage in these journeys with people that are experienced and somewhat wise in helping us guide us through it. So when somebody talks about a bad experience, I say, no, you didn't have a bad experience. What you had is an experience where you experienced pain. What you had was an experience where you were in touch with a lot of fear, maybe even terror. But that pain and that terror, you've been carrying inside yourself all your life. And you've been running away from it all your life. It's not a bad thing to experience them. It's only bad if you have no means to digest the experience, to understand it, to put it into context, and to move on for it. So when I work with people with ayahuasca, or when I go into an experience myself with some other guide, whether with 5-MeO, DMT, or whether psilocybin, or whatever it is, I don't care whether pain is going to come up, fear is going to come up, terror is going to come up. In fact, if it comes up, so be it, because it's only coming up because it's already there. Would I rather be aware of it and know it and revisit it with the awareness and the strength and the mind of an adult? Or would I keep myself still in denial of it? So there are no bad experiences. There are only experiences whose meaning you haven't divined, you haven't had the guidance to understand, and you haven't had the support to integrate into your life. So for me, it's never about beautiful experiences, entities, songs, beautiful colors. If that happens, that's great. That's what you're meant to have at that time. I'm not putting that down, but that can't be the intention. The intention has to be the truth, whatever the truth is. And if the truth at that moment is painful, that's great. That's great. Because once we realize, our essence, well, first of all, once we realize the degree of pain that we each carry, the fear that we each carry. Let me give you a quote from Almas. He says, the child is very open and can feel the pain and suffering going on in its immediate environment. The child is aware of its own body and can also feel the tension, rigidity, and pain in the body of the mother or of anyone else he's with. If the mother suffers, the baby suffers too. The pain never gets discharged. The organism does not develop the confidence that it can regulate itself, and that things will happen as they should. And if the pain and suffering continues, they will have a disintegrating effect on the organism, and the child will experience organismic fear for its very survival. So when people at our ceremonies experience terror, I say congratulations, you've gone back to your experience as an infant. This is a memory. This is not who you are. And underneath that fear is that connected self that knows no fear. What's there to be afraid of when you're connected to everything? So those are the two major dynamics that I find helpful in the plant-spirit experiences. First of all, we get to find what we're running from, the fear, the pain. And if we're fortunate enough, then before or after, we also get to experience the depth of who we are, which also means we don't have to keep running. And then the issue becomes then, how do you incorporate that, how do you integrate that into your life? And so I have to emphasize here the importance of integration. So don't expect the insight, which is like a door opening, to save you, because it won't. Because you can have that experience in the moment under the influence of the particular substance that you've been working with. But unless you are intent on taking that substance all the time, which you can't, then you better have to find ways of integrating that insight into your life. And that takes daily work. That takes daily work. So the post-ceremony, or the post-event, the post-experience integration is at least as important as the experience itself. Otherwise, you're just going to keep going back, looking for the same experience over and over again. And nothing necessarily will have shifted for you. There are some people, with or without substances, who are able to have a transformative, transcendental experience that really does rewire them permanently. But I've met very few of those people. I've met very few of them, if any. I know of some. But for most of us, it's ongoing work. So the experiences can open those doors of perception. They can give us glimpses or deep but momentary experiences of our true selves. But then the work is to go back and keep clearing out all the accumulated debris that we've took on ever since early infancy to compensate for the loss. So when you understand my definition of trauma, which has to do with that disconnect, then you understand that trauma has many different manifestations. There's a psychological, emotional aspect of trauma, which is that disconnect from the self, and therefore also a relationship to the world. So the traumatized person, and by my definition, most of us are traumatized. We live in a different world. We live in a world where we're alone. We live in a world which is perhaps dangerous. We live in a world that's indifferent. We live in a world where we have to constantly having to work to validate ourselves. That's the world we live in. And the Buddha said very clearly that it's with our thoughts, with our minds that we create the world. That's the world that we create. The problem is, this is the task of modern psychology perhaps, this is where modern psychology can so usefully blend with ancient spiritual teaching, is that before our minds create the world creates our minds. And so we have to go back to who we were before the world created our mind. In terms of mental health, depression, anxiety, addiction, psychoses, these all begin as compensations. You might think, how can depression be a compensation? Well, let me give you an example. Let's say you have a 2-year-old and she's angry with you. Incidentally, if you do have a 2-year-old and she's not angry with you, you haven't done your job. It's that simple. Because she cannot have a cookie before dinner. And she can't have a shiny knife to play with. And she can't pull the dog's tail. And she can't climb on the windowsill when the window's open. You have to say no. And 2-year-olds, like many of us as adults even, can't distinguish between their needs and their wants. So when you frustrate somebody's perceived needs, they get aggressive. Frustration is the engine of aggression, as my friend, the psychologist Gordon Neufeld says. So the child gets aggressively angry because she couldn't have that cookie. Nothing wrong with that, so long as you're not threatened by the anger. But what if you grew up in a family where there was rage a lot, where your parents were in conflict, rageful conflict, and you have this intrinsic and innate, implicit memory of fear whenever you experience or witness anger, and then unwittingly you give the message to your 2-year-old that good little girls don't get angry. What the child is getting is not that good little girls don't get angry, but that angry little girls don't get loved. And what will she do with the anger? Since she can't do without your love, she cannot. She's going to push the anger down. What's the word for pushing something down? Depression. And 30 years later, she'll be diagnosed with depression, and somebody will hand her a pill. And that pill, which I'm not against, I've taken them, they can be helpful, but they're not the answer. The answer is to actually, what is it that I pushed down? And why did I? And do I still need to? In other words, to reconnect again with the real self. So mental health issues, they all begin with compensations. The tuning out of ADHD is not a disease, it's a coping mechanism to deal with overwhelming stress. These temporary compensatory mechanisms become a source of pathology later on. Physical health, when you suppress yourself in order to please others, because of the mind and the body being one unit, that are inseparable. This is not my particular insight, this is what science shows us. And as I was saying to a medical colleague just a few minutes ago, that the problem with medicine is we keep talking about evidence-based practice, but we ignore much of the evidence. And the evidence is that when you suppress emotions, you're actually suppressing the immune system as well, for the simple reason that you can't separate the mind from the body. Scientifically, you can't. And the consequence is then the immune system will attack you, and now you have autoimmune disease like multiple sclerosis.
Still got a few minutes. I'm going to zoom in on what I've done so far. It's getting some nice colors and shapes happening.
That pushing down of emotion was how you compensated for your parents' inability to handle your emotions. Trauma has then impacts on physical health, on your relationships, and finally, of course, it's got a spiritual aspect because...
So, 3 minutes. I don't think I can do much more in that time. I want to watch my
spirituality is such a loaded word in the sense that we all load it with their own particular meanings, but I'll give you my own general understanding of it, which is spirituality is the awareness that we're not our personalities, that we're not just our bodies, we're not just our thoughts and our emotions, there's something deeper, more eternal, more connected about us, and that connection is with the universe. Well, when you're traumatized, you shut that down too. So this is where the plant medicines can be so helpful.
Alright, so there is some happy little scales on the Viper in the corner that will be tapered out and around into the rest of the composition as well. And then become watery shapes, transforming into watery shapes in the lower portion, with the crimson and probably some Payne's gray and maybe some blue as well.
Tried to kill herself 17 times. But
that is it for the moment. We'll zoom this in for the sake of... Zoom this out and then in for the sake of the final process video cut.
I'll leave you the final quote before I take
It's always kind of fun when I do that. There we go. Have a good night, Earth. It's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Ranch in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting, alchemical light.
Conquering ourselves.